And welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're going to be introducing our host for the evening. It is Atticus Nair. Come on down, Atticus! Hey, hi. Hey, how are you? Let's go ahead and get started. What is up, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive, diving deeper into the Nightmare Cup, and today we're actually coming up on our second to last deep dive. I'm trying to fit in some really interesting Pokemon in the last few days here, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you, tomorrow is going to be a... So today we're actually looking at Shiftry, who is a dark and grass type Pokemon. At level 40 with 15s across the board, you can max out at 2333. Now with a 0 on attack, 14 defense, and 11 stamina, you can hit 1500 even at level 24.5. So not too shabby there. Now, according to my spreadsheet and all the numbers that I have ran, Shiftry should rank around 35th in bulk and 27th in stat products, so not the greatest, but definitely not the worst either. Now, of course, all of that comes from his base stats here, which attack at 200, a defense at 121, and a stamina at 207. He's putting up some really good numbers. He's actually putting up some really high numbers in the 200s here, but that defense, man, if his defense and attack were swapped, oh, it would be such a good spread for PvP here. Now, unlike yesterday's video, we do have a move that's not written up here, and it's only because basically I don't have a way to like full-on test it, and in simulations it's kind of wonky. It doesn't really give a true picture of what this move is capable of. And that move, of course, is Leaf Tornado. So Leaf Tornado does have that special attribute that it's a 50-50 chance that you're going to decrease the attack of your opponent by one single stage. So considering that it's a 50-50 and considering that it's extremely difficult to show off in a simulation type scenario, it's not really worthy of talking about in a deep dive, in my opinion. I definitely do think that it's worth it if you're that guy that likes to play the kamikaze style, if you like to, leave it up to a coin flip, if you love to play on the edge of your seat. Leaf Tornado may be better for you. In terms of reliability, I definitely think that Leaf Blade makes a whole lot more sense here. Today we're actually looking at Feint Attack and Razor Leaf for our two fast moves. So on one hand, I want to say that Feint Attack may have a place because it does gain you an extra energy per turn. But honestly, because it's a dark type move, I really don't think that you want to go with Feint Attack for any reason. Honestly, Razor Leaf just makes so much more sense because Razor Leaf is going to hit all three types, at least a mono-typed Pokemon, for neutral damage. And then on top of that, you're going to be able to hit a lot of things for super effective damage, like the ground types like Claydol, and actually the water types like Poliwrath and the Slowbro and Slowking. Slowpoke, by the way, don't forget about my boy. And then I mean, Feint Attack, while giving you an extra energy per turn, it's not like make or break here. Plus, if you run Feint Attack, you're going to be doing resisted damage up against a ton of the Pokemon in the cup, which unfortunately just makes it so much worse. Even though Razor Leaf only gets you 2 energy per turn, it does have a huge payoff in the damage area though. So let's actually go over this. So Feint Attack, 3 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn at a whopping 3.6 after stab. Then we do have Razor Leaf here for 2 energy per turn with 5.5 damage per turn, but it does get bumped to that 6.6 after stab. And 6.6 damage per turn is pretty freaking insane. Moving on to our charge moves here, so this one's kind of clear cut for me as well. Having Hurricane may benefit against a small number of matchups, but honestly, like, not too many of them. The flying typing is going to help in some of the fighting type matchups, but with Razor Leaf's absurd amount of damage and minimal amount of energy, it's going to take you a lot longer to get to Hurricane than I think you'd want to. So, I definitely think that we should kind of take Hurricane and put it over here for a while. We're just going to leave it right over there. So we're going to go with Foul Play and Leaf Blade for our 2 moves as the moveset for our Shiftry in this video. Well, let's actually go through each move individually here. So Foul Play, costing 45 for 70 damage at a 1.56 damage per energy ratio. After you factor in the stab, it does go up to 84 damage for an 1.86 damage per energy ratio. Pretty beefy. Hurricane costing 65 for 110 damage at a 1.69. Of course, since it's a flying type move, we do not get any kind of stab bonus. Leaf Blade costing 35 for 70 damage at a 2.0 damage per energy ratio. That's pretty big. After you factor in stab, it does bump up to 84 damage for a 2.4 damage per energy ratio. So, our moveset for today is actually going to be Razor Leaf, Foul Play, and Leaf Blade. I definitely think that with those three moves, we do have the best fighting chance up against the meta with our Shiftry here. So let's actually go over some shield situations. So in our 0 versus 0 here, we do actually have a type of like closing matchup whenever both Pokemon don't have any shields to play with. Flat out of the gate, 49.3%. That's not too shabby. We're actually doing about 50%, which is pretty good considering that there's only 3 typings. We're at least beating an entire type worth of Pokemon plus a few extra. Next, moving on to the 2 versus 0. So this is when I have 2 shields and my opponent doesn't have any shields. We actually end up winning 76.1. Now what I'm actually looking for in this 2 versus 0 is actually which Pokemon that we just flat out cannot beat. So if I have 2 full shields and my opponent doesn't have any, I'm actually interested which Pokemon they have that can actually penetrate through me. So, no, that doesn't sound very high, but we have to remember that the fighting types are a really big deal for us. We're basically not going to have a whole lot of like actual super effective damage to go at the fighting types, while they actually have a ton of super effective damage coming back at us. Then we also have to include these fire types, things like Houndoom, Combusken, Blaziken, all of the fire starters that are actually firefighting. They actually have a pretty good chance to use fire type moves up against us, and even some of the rare cases where some other Pokemons may have fire move, like if you have Fire Hidden Power Starmie, that actually could have some sort of a fighting chance. But remember, it is a water type and we will have Razor Leaf and Leaf Blade, so kind of a toss up there. But anyway, the fire typing definitely does give us a problem. In our next scenario, we're going to have a 0 versus 2. So when I don't have any shields and my opponent actually has 2 shields, we're actually interested in the Pokemon that we can actually flat out beat in this scenario. So if they have complete shield advantage, I want to know which Pokemon, I don't care how many shields they have, I'm still going to end up beating. Well, we actually win 35.8% of the matchups, and a lot of those are water and a lot of psychic types as well. So while we do have a lot of neutral damage going out from our fast move, we do have a really distinct advantage in the psychics because we do have this foul play here, and considering that it doesn't cost a whole lot, it's pretty accessible even with Razor Leaf. Our last scenario is actually this 2 versus 2, which is actually a mock-up like opening type situation. When I have 2 shields and my opponent also has 2 shields, we actually end up winning 62.7%, which is pretty freaking huge. That's almost 2 full typings that we can beat here. And what that tells you is 62.7 versus 49.3. We definitely do prefer to open here rather than we close. So now let's actually get into a few matchups of our Shiftry here. And I do want to remind you that everything on this board is ran with a 1 versus 1 shield scenario to try to give both Pokemon the most even shield situation between the 2 of them. So in every deep dive, I end up taking our subject Pokemon, of course Shiftry today, and I put them up against the top 10 bulkiest Pokemon, just to kind of see how they do. And Shiftry is looking pretty good here. So Umbreon, Wobbuffet, Hypno, Claydol, Grumpig, Alolan Raticate, Slowbro, Slowking, all end up falling to our Shiftry, which is just great. Now, we do have Metang as a loss, but it's basically because we tie. So we end up tying up against Metang, and I consider that a loss only because I lost my Pokemon in the battle, therefore it's a loss for me. I don't want to lose my Pokemon. Then we have Bronzong here. So if Bronzong ends up having Feint Attack, it does actually result in a tie. But if we take Bronzong and actually give it Confusion, it does change the outcome of this battle just slightly. Actually ends up giving the edge just barely to Shiftry here. So Shiftry actually does end up winning the battle, but with only 3 HP left. So it's kind of a toss-up, honestly. Like, once you factor in like server issues and, you know, like real life tapping scenario and stuff like that, like it may vary just a tad bit, because of course while PvPoke is simulation based, it does assume like perfect attack every turn and stuff like that. Like, certain scenarios could make that matchup going just a little bit crazy. So now let's actually talk about countering with Shiftry and what we need to counter Shiftry with. Does that make sense? What should we be focusing our attention on whenever we're using Shiftry versus what do we need to be bringing to the table to actually combat a Shiftry? Well, in terms of what we should be focusing our attention on, you basically have a pretty good idea that you want to work with the dark types. Basically, as long as it does not have a poison move or a flying type move, you can basically handle it. So the ones that we're worried about, of course, are Houndoom. Has access to fire moves. I forgot to write that, but fire moves are still an issue. Alolan Muck, Alolan Grimer, Drapion, Skuntank, Murkrow, and Honchkrow all are big deals. Now we do end up tying up against Mightyena, and from here it starts to get a little easier. So Umbreon, Cacturn, Sneasel, Weavile, Nuzleaf, Alolan Raticate, Tyranitar. From there, it just gets easier and easier. Crawdaunt, Spiritomb, and Sharpedo. Absol actually rounding out the easiest matchup to go up against with our Shiftry here. Now, in terms of the Psychic typings, basically, as long as it's not Xatu, we're okay. There are a couple of tie situations, like we talked about with the Bronzong and the Metang, and the Bronzong is still that weary one, but Xatu is a big deal because it does have access to a ton of flying type moves. It does give us a lot of problems. Jinx can also be a problem, but I don't really foresee a lot of people going for Jinx these days. And then it just kind of gets easier from there. Starmie, Wobbuffet, Executor, Execute, Solrock, Lunatone, Girafarig, Gallade, Drowsy, Slowbro, Slowking, Spoink, Espeon, Mr. Mime, Alolan Raichu, Claydol. Like, all of these just become easier and easier as you go along. So being able to target both the Darks and the Psychics is a pretty big deal. But if you're thinking about, oh, well, Shiftry is going to be a big deal, all you got to do is bring some fighting types. Those are basically going to just nullify a lot of what Shiftry brings to the table. Now, I do have Poliwrath and Gallade written up here because that's the only thing that Shiftry is going to be able to beat. So Poliwrath is going to fall really hard considering that it does have that water typing. It's not going to be able to do a ton of damage to our Shiftry, especially if it's using Mud Shot. It's just not going to be able to do a whole lot of damage to us. Gallade, also kind of a not so big issue. And then we do kind of have a couple of other ones here, but I didn't really think they were going to be relevant. Machop, Machoke, Hitmonlee, we still beat them, but they're just, I don't foresee people using them too often. Now, of course, Heracross is a big, big no-no for Shiftry. Heracross having access to Bug-type moves up against our Grass-type is going to be a big deal. Plus, it actually, oh man, that's even worse, because it would be, it'd be for the Dark and the Grass. And then Blaziken having access to Fire. Toxicroak, just being Toxicroak, having access to both Fighting and Poison type is kind of a big deal. Combusken with Fire. Breloom being able to resist a lot of our Grass-type damage, while being able to hit us for super effective damage. Monferno, Lucario, all these Pokemon give us a really, really hard time with a Shiftry. So if you're looking to counter Shiftry, basically most of the fighters will do it. There are a couple of caveats though. You just gotta kind of stay away from the Poliwrath and the Gallade if you're looking to counter. Last but not least here, let's actually talk a little bit about some pros and cons. So I still today only have one of each. So our con is that he is kind of crap up against the fighters. But I mean, if you're just saying, if that's the only con that I have, is it really even a con? Like, Shiftry's good, really good. And if the typing that actually beats his typing is the only bad thing about him, I mean, that's almost like a pro within itself. And then actually on the pro is that we have so many great neutral matchups. Like, oh, Shiftry is just so good at just the fact that you can beat two typings, almost entire two typings, is no joke. That's so big. Like, holy cow, that's amazing. I would have no problem suggesting Shiftry to be tested and put onto your team. Like, he's amazing. He's so good. You should test out Shiftry. You should try Shiftry, I'm telling you. So that is actually it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for hanging out. Remember that if you do have any ideas for versus videos, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you. I already have tomorrow's video planned. It's already, like, it's going to happen. It's already in the books. You can't change my mind on it. I'm dead set on doing it. But if you do have any versus video ideas, please drop them down below. Otherwise, I'm just going to kind of go with what I have. But we will figure out that on Saturday and Sunday of this week. Thank you so much for hanging out, and always remember that if you like to like videos, you can do that, but if you don't, you could be that guy. Otherwise, you can let me know what you have to say down in the comments below, and until our next video, I will catch you then.